Hello, my name is Josh from Josh's Frogs, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about vivarium construction. One of the first steps when you're setting up a dart frog terrarium is to decide if you're going to do a background or not. Now, backgrounds aren't a necessity for dart frogs, but they do allow some more usable space inside the terrarium, and they look kind of nice. And there's a lot of different options for backgrounds. There's stuff called tree fern panel, which you'll just take and you'll actually silicone right to the back of the tank. And what you want to do is make sure that you're using either aquarium safe silicone, or if you go to Home Depot, Lowe's, or Walmart, you can actually get 100% silicone, put it in a caulk gun, and glue it right to the background. Same is true of the cocoa fiber backgrounds, which we at Josh's Frogs sell latex covered ones, so they last a lot longer. But again, you just glue it to the back of the terrarium, and then you can plant plants on that. Another option is to use the Great Stuff method. And the way you do that is you buy a can of Great Stuff, and it's expanded. It's an expandable foam, and you spray it right on the back of the terrarium, and then you can place net pots right in it. So you can spray it on and push them in, or you can actually hold them in place, spray around them so that it holds those in, and then you can use these pots to plant from. Once you spray it on, it's kind of a nasty yellow color, so there's a lot of different ways to change the color. One of the most common ways is actually silicone either cocoa fiber onto it, or you can silicone peat moss as well. And one of the tips that I like to give people is when you're actually gluing the cocoa fiber or the peat moss onto the terrarium background is to actually use brown silicone. So if you have any gaps or anything like that, it kind of blends in a little bit easier. And when you add on the cocoa fiber or peat moss to the background, a lot of it's going to fall off, so you have to do many coats to get a perfect coat to cover up all the yellow from the Great Stuff. So once you have the background done, then you're ready to start with the substrate. First thing you want to do is you always want to start off at the bottom of the tank with a layer of hydrogen. And hydrogen is just expanded clay. And you pour it in the bottom. Flatten it out. And you want anywhere from 1 to 3 inches of that stuff. And then you're going to put down a substrate divider. There's a couple of things that work good. We like to use weed block. You can also use fiberglass window screening, or really anything that will keep dirt from falling into the drainage layer. And poke it in the corners so you make sure none of the substrate is going to fall through. And we sell many different kinds of substrates. There's a million different kinds. One of the best substrates for terrariums, especially for dart frogs, is something called ABG mix, something that was designed by the Atlanta Botanical Gardens. And it's really a mix of 5 different things. And some of the items in there hold a lot of water, whereas other ones drain really well. So it's a good mix. So it holds water for the plants, but also drains well, so your plants aren't sitting in soggy substrate. And put one more bag in here. And mix it up a little bit. And the reason you want a drainage layer is so that when you're misting your plants and your animals in here, the water will drain through the substrate and then down into the layer of hydrogen. That way your plants aren't sitting in water all the time. Once you put down the substrate, we like to top it off with sphagnum moss. And there's a couple reasons for that. First is the sphagnum moss holds a little bit of moisture, so you have the high humidity in the terrarium. But also it keeps the dirt from being tracked around the tank by the frogs or other animals that you might have in there. So they're not getting the glass all dirty and not getting dirt that will stick to their skin and kind of irritate them. So top it off, make sure it's all covered, like so. And now we're ready to plant. Before you plant the tank, you want to do some of the hardscaping, some of the rocks, the logs, whatever you're going to use to make some areas to plant the tanks. And at Josh's Frogs, we have a lot of different kinds of woods, from cypress to bamboo root to bamboo canes to moapani. We also have driftwood burrows and lianas as well. But today we're going to do this tank up with a cypress knee. We're going to tilt it like this, so that we have utilizing a lot of surface area by putting it up higher in the ground instead of laying it directly right on the substrate. And now we got it set up, and we're going to do some planting. And I brought out some examples of some of the plants that we sell from some of the vining stuff. Like this is Wandering Jew, which will grow pretty much anywhere from on the wood to in the substrate. Then some of the ferns, which you can grow some of them mounted, but most of the time you're going to want to plant the ferns directly in the substrate. Then we have some jewel orchids like these that do very well inside the terrariums. Also, again, you can grow them mounted, but they do a lot better in the substrate. And then true orchids, as we like to call them, you're going to want to mount those. So that's why we use stuff like wood, so that you can take it out of the pot. You can use fishing line or toothpicks or some way to just mount it on that wood so they can grow roots to attach it there. Another epiphyte, very common with poison dart frogs, are bromeliads, such as this one. This is an Aztec, and that's going to need to be mounted as well. So you're going to need to plant that right on the wood as well. There are other bromeliads that grow in the substrate. These are called crypts, type of bromeliad that can grow right in the substrate. So you're going to plant the tank, and then after you're done planting the tank, you're going to want to seed it with springtails. There's a few reasons for that. First off, for smaller animals such as poison dart frogs, it's a great food source, but also it takes care of some of the mold and fungus, kind of creating an ecosystem right there inside the terrarium. And there's a couple ways to feed off the springtails into the tank. You can actually pour the water from the culture into the tank, or you can just dump the whole culture right in the tank to seed it with the springtails. And the springtails will reproduce right there in terrarium. So once you have it all planted, you're going to want to add some accents, and there's a lot of different accents that you can add. Leaf litter is a must if you're doing poison dart frogs, and we carry a bunch of different leaves, from the sea grape leaves that we have there that work out nicely in there, and also smaller leaves like the live oak leaves, which are really tiny leaves but hold up pretty well in a terrarium. And then also magnolia leaves work good, or even other kinds of oak leaves work as well. You want to use those kind of leaves because they're going to last longer than some of the other leaves would in your terrarium, to make sure that the leaves are from a spot that's pesticide and herbicide free. A lot of reasons that you do leaf litter on the tanks, from visual barriers for the frogs, so that there's hiding spots that they can kind of dash into when they get spooked. And that kind of increases how bold the frogs are, because if there's a lot of hiding spots, they feel like, hey, if I get in danger, I can just hop away and hide. It also, as it breaks down, it becomes food for the springtails and other bugs that are in the terrarium, that the frogs that kind of hunt through the leaves and pick up some of those insects as well. And also, leaf litter then becomes a breeding ground for a lot of different frogs. They lay in between the overlapping leaves in the terrarium. So there's a lot of uses besides just the way it looks for leaf litter. You can also use things like the seed pods, which are kind of cool accents in the tank, and as well as the ever-famous cocoa hut can go in there as well. Once you have all the accents planted, all set up, you're ready to add the lighting to the tank. Okay, now with poison dart frogs, you're going to want to do a completely all-glass lid. And the best way to do that is actually to call up one of the glass shops in your local town, measure the rim of the tank, and buy two pieces of glass that are going to fit right inside those rims. Then you can use hinges to go between the two pieces of glass, and then we have also knobs and pulls so that you can lift up the top of the glass. Once you have the lid done, you're going to want to do some lighting for the tank. Now, the lighting doesn't matter for the poison dart frogs, they don't care. It's for the actual plants. And there's a few different lighting options. The first is T5 strips, which are way more efficient and less hot than other lighting that you might buy at Home Depot and stuff, the normal shop lights. These actually are pretty thin, and they need to be mounted on a shelf above the tank. So if you're doing a rack of tanks, these kind of strip lights work really well. Another option, Exoterra makes some really great lights that use spiral compact fluorescence, and it's an actual whole hood, so if you're setting this like in your living room or in your dining room, these work out perfect. And just set it right down on the tank. And then you're going to want to hook the lights up to some kind of timer so that they turn on during the day and off during the night. Get a good light cycle, not only for the animals, but especially for the plants. And once you do that, you're all set and ready to get your first frogs.